Assalamu alaikum. So this video is going to be a little bit different because this is entirely a theory on my own, and I'm just going to draw upon some scientific principles because while I was listening to some Quran, I heard something and it struck a memory for me. So specifically, what I read was this was in Surah Al-Baqarah. So just that I'll read parts of the ayat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is ayah number 6. Okay, where it says, إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم, and it continues. So essentially, the disbelievers, whether you warn them or you don't warn them, they're not going to believe. Allah has placed the seal Khatam Allah on their hearts, on their eyes, on their hearing, so on and so forth. Now, I thought, what is this? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would He place a seal on these people? And this is sort of what got me into the chat. So this brings me about predeterminism and free will, and how does this relate? Now, this is all hypothetical, but I'm going to introduce just one kind of scientific fact, okay? And I'll explain it as briefly as I can. It's what's known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay, so this is in quantum mechanics, by the way. This is just from high school physics that I remember. This is not my field, but from the understanding that I have. So before we used to have this planetary model of the atom, right? Yeah, you have the atom where you have the nucleus in the middle with the protons and neutrons, and then you have the planetary orbit of the electrons going around. But then later on, when quantum mechanics sort of took precedence over the Newtonian mechanics that we had, they came up with these orbitals, okay, where they can, instead of saying the electrons spin around these specific kind of, orbits around the nucleus, they made this cloud, and they have this probability function that can pinpoint where the electron might be relative to the nucleus of the atom. Now, why is this important? Because it states, okay, according to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, essentially, when we're talking about the attributes of a particle, specifically a particle's position and momentum, these two are sacrificed in terms of their accuracy when we choose one over the other. So the equation specifically, because mathematically it makes a lot of sense, but I understand that a lot of people might not be mathematically inclined. But it's represented by the product of a particle's momentum multiplied by the product of the particle's momentum and the particle's position has to be greater than or equal to the reduced version of Planck's constant over 2. Now, that might not make a lot of sense, but essentially, what it means is you have the product of the two variables, the particle's position and momentum, has to be greater than a finite number. Although that number is extremely, extremely small. As we know, if you guys know anything about Planck's constant, it's a very small number. Regardless, the point is, the product of position and momentum of a particle must be greater than or equal to a finite amount, albeit a very small amount. Meaning, necessarily, we can mathematically extrapolate from this that you're choosing either a particle's momentum or a particle's position. And if you want to pinpoint, theoretically, a particle's position with absolute certainty, although we can't, but if you were to choose absolute certainty, you would not know about its momentum. So if you want to know momentum very precisely, you would not know about position. And if you want to know position very precisely, you would not know about momentum. And so there's that sacrifice between accurately measuring. You cannot accurately measure both. The higher you increase accuracy in one measurement, the lower it is for the other. Now, how does this relate to what I'm saying? If we go back, theoretically back to the Big Bang, and now I'm coming from a completely secular point of view, right? So if we go back to the Big Bang, we know that the universe is finite. This is even contested now, some people say it's not, but it's the prevailing scientific consensus, essentially, that the universe is finite, and we know that it's expanding right now. Essentially, we know that the universe must have begun at a certain time, right? That's the current prevailing theory. Okay. And for that, because it's expanding, we believe that it is a finite amount that's expanding. Now, theoretically, this is all hypothetical, of course. At one point, every single particle that would have existed was at a certain position and had a certain momentum, right? If we could, at that point, exactly pinpoint the particles, all the particles' momentums and positions. We can't do that right now. We know we can't. According to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, it's not possible. But theoretically, at that point, and given that this was, the beginning of the universe, and if there was a being, or if there is a being that is capable of such calculations, then it would carry through that each consequent action, given that we have all these variables, every particle's position and momentum, we would know the next consequent action. If I put this in an analogy, think of a pool table, okay, and you have the little billiard balls. If I can tell you with utmost accuracy, with perfect accuracy, how hard I'm going to strike the ball, which ball at which angle, what's the friction coefficient between the table, the ball itself, other external factors, other forces that might be interplaying, how the ball is striking, the value of gravity. Essentially, if I take into account every single force that's acting on the ball, and I know all the parameters and variables that are associated with the ball that's being struck and all the other balls, so on and so forth, I can accurately predict the course of action that each and every ball will take, given those initial variables that we start with. Yeah, this can't be done right now in terms of every single particle because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But there would have been a time at the beginning of the universe where I think it would have been possible, because everything, we had the point of singularity. Everything was at one single condensed point, and we had that initial. It would have occupied. So the singularity would have occupied a specific position in the universe, and it would have had a momentum. Essentially, because it's a singularity, it would have been nothing. It came from nothing, right? This is a little tricky, but my point is, if a being had the ability to know all these parameters, all these attributes of every single particle, then it so follows through that every consequent action that the particles must take through would also be within the knowledge of this being. Right? So now, how does this play into free will and predeterminism? Well, from a secular point of view, what do they say humans are, and what do they say our consciousness is? It's merely just the product of the interplay of our neurotransmitters, right? What we are, who we are, the way we think, even the next thought that we have. The fact that I'm making this video coming from a completely secular or atheistic point of view, they will say simply that I am the product of all my previous choices, and even before I even existed, I am simply the product of essentially the position and momentum of every single particle that has eventually led to the manifestation of my being here. So, should there have been a being that was able to accurately pinpoint a particle's momentum and position, they would know exactly what I'm doing right now. And not only would they know what I'm doing right now, they would know beforehand what I was going to do before I even do it. Is that something that we can comprehend? Of course not. It's something that's, we just can't comprehend it. But it's a thought process that, at least to me, sort of makes sense. It makes sense. It's almost like it's a scientific necessity, but something that we cannot comprehend. Right? Yeah. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this. Yeah. Inshallah, maybe I've confused a lot of people. To be honest, I've even confused myself to an extent here. But that's the point of it, not the confusion. The crux of my argument here is, should there have been a being that exactly pinpointed every single particle's momentum and position, then they must and they should know the consequent trajectory of each and every single particle until this point here. Because we are simply remnants of particles that have gone through certain actions, interactions between each other from the Big Bang until now. Correct? Is this not what the secular perspective brings forth? So, inshallah, I'll put forth some thoughts, and maybe this is helpful for some people. Yeah. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.